an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Cradle Book 10, Reaper. Chapters 18, 19, and 20. In these chapters, well, everybody has had to split up after all. I feel so bad. At the same time, I kind of appreciate it. And I'm really, not sure what the fuck is going on with Eithan still, guys. What is he doing? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. Andy, if you are in the chat, what's going on? So Andy sent me an email last week, and then the day he sent it, I got really sick, and I wound up having to postpone all of the Spoil Me's from last week. So I'm going to be doing more Spoil Me's this week than usual. And Andy emailed asking whether or not we should add a Reaper episode so that it would be easier for me to fit coverage. And I'm so sorry that I never replied, Andy. I just got so sick, and then it wasn't until I started reading for today that I realized I never replied to you. But he is thinking that it probably would be best because I've got how many more episodes after this? I think 3 are booked. No, just 2. So I think maybe we'll do that, but because I have had to postpone so much already because of getting sick last week, when I would normally have wanted to put it into the schedule, it kind of makes it too crowded a week now. So I will keep you guys informed about when I can fit it. It's most likely going to fall on a Wednesday or a Saturday, depending on what I'm able to do. So yeah, I'm going to try and space things out towards the end so that I have a little bit more time to talk about things, probably make sure that I have the least to cover in the final episode, and that way I won't just have to rush through everything. So thank you, Andy, very, very much for offering to do that. This is a thing with trying to predict about a book that isn't out yet when it gets booked. You just never really know how you're going to break the chapters down. It can be really tricky. So anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know how that was going to go, for those of you who like to attend the lives. And now let's talk about what's going on with Ziel, who is the guy who starts off chapter 18. Guys, look, I know I do this every week, but I just have to say, I love Will White so much. I just do. I love him. And it's things like this, okay? Remember when Lindon went to do his advancement to Underlord, and it started to kick in as he was in the Soul... I think he was in the Soul Forge, right? Or not, it wasn't Soul Forge. It was Soulsmith Foundry. What are they called when it's not the Soul Forge? But it was Fisher Gesha's place. He starts to, realize his insight, begins to go over, and then all of a sudden gets fucking tackled by Mercy, who is this is the actual worst place to do this. Wait until we are in the vault and you are surrounded by aura-rich treasures, and then you will be able to do it like that. But if you do it here, it's going to take way too fucking long. It could take you up to a week. And so he stops and he goes back to normal and waits to advance until he gets in the vault, like she said. He follows her instructions. What I love about Will White's writing is that he will show us the ideal version of a thing, and then he will show us what happens with, quote, normal people who maybe don't know or aren't prepared. So, we've seen what's going on with Kelsa and the fact that she isn't able to advance as quickly as Lindon is because she does not have the management of her Madra down the way that he does. And it's just, an example of having all of the resources, but not necessarily being able to do what everyone else can do with those same resources. And Ziel accidentally triggers his advancement in a way that like just takes him completely by surprise. And that's like the thing, it feels like, with everybody with the Underlord revelation. Everybody seems sort of taken off guard by it. And he is not in an aura-rich environment. He doesn't even have like the best of his sacred treasures out. It's like kind of painful, honestly, the way that this has happened to him. And because of that, he is going to have a longer advancement. And like, this chapter ends, or not the chapter ends, but his section ends. And it has been like almost a day, and he's not, like, barely begun. And so he had been in charge of like a squad, essentially, out there in the field fighting. And now he has to just sit here and advance. And it sucks. Like, he's really frustrated by it. He has to leave. Like, his whole concern has been the fact that his sister and Kelsa are out there kind of out of their league and maybe shouldn't have been approved for this mission at all. And now he isn't even there to watch their backs in the very, like, intent way that only somebody who's friends with them would, you know? I'm hoping that because he was in charge of the squad, whoever like winds up taking his place for the time being recognizes how important these two are to him and treats them like their own, because they realize that there will be hell to pay if something happens to the two of them. Especially considering that the guy who would be mad about it is now advancing to Underlord. Like, fingers crossed that that's enough to motivate them. But it's just really interesting to me to get to actually see when shit doesn't quite go right. You know, I love being told about the alternatives to the best case scenario. And it isn't just a theoretical. We wind up getting to watch that play out and actually see what the difference in practice is. I just love it. I'm just so excited about it. Like, it's so annoying, and I feel really bad for him because, like, he has been trying for this for so long that to stumble on it like this and not be fully prepared, it is really, like, it's just frustrating. At the same time, though, this is a really good example of the difference between him and Lindon. And that is not to say that Lindon knew completely about the danger if he wasn't in an aura-rich environment. He had to be told by Mercy. He had to be stopped before he, like, proceeded with his intention. But he seems to really, like, when he decides he's going to sit down and he's going to try to advance, he fully prepares. It's not like ever something he half-heartedly does with the suspicion that it probably won't happen this time. Every time he tries for it, it feels like he is fully thinking, it's probably going to happen this time. I think I'm going to get it this time. He's got a different attitude about it than Jailong does, which I just find kind of compelling because, of course, because he's tried so many times, Jailong is going to be a little bit more cynical about his chances. But considering, like, the way that things have happened for Lindon since he was born and all of the obstacles that he faced in never being able to advance even a little, he has so much more faith after having advanced so quickly once he gets out of Sacred Valley. Just an interesting, like, you know, contrast between the two of them. I just really like the two of them have so many weird little similarities, and yet they have just handled the world around them so completely differently and reacted so completely differently. So, this, like, before he starts his advancement, we get to see some of the fight. And he is talking about, or thinking about, how they are not fighting mercilessly, because the fight is for territory, not for extermination. And I thought that was really, like, that's a nice way to sort of differentiate, you know? I thought that was an interesting detail to mention specifically. And then he is thinking about the fact that the real battle is going on above their head, literally above their heads. And he is kind of, like, overwhelmed by it a little bit. Like, he's trying not to be, but you really get the sense that he's just, like, Good God. Thunder and lightning cracked the sky as underlords clashed in flight. One was a burly, bearded man from the Cloudhammer sect. His weapon and ring cloud gold sign gave him away. That was the underlord from the Black Flame Empire. His opponent was probably 20 years his junior and also carried a cloud over his head. The Ghost Blade wore gray robes and a veil over his face, and his gold sign was a hovering spirit of Death Madra. Y'all, I just want to see it. I just want to see it. I just want to see it. Is that so much to ask? Genuinely. Like, I love the name Ghost Blade also. I'm pretty sure that that's been mentioned before, and I stopped and talked about it then too. So that fight was one of 100. Underlords fought, firing techniques of incredible scope, with overlords above and between them. Here and there, even archlords. As terrifying as that fact was, it wasn't as bone-chilling as the reality that the real powers of each side hadn't even moved. The occasional technique that a herald or sage sent out shone like sunrise and blotted out spiritual perception all over the battlefield. Those weren't even attacks. They were warnings. Yo, this shit is too much. I am into it. What I love, because it's been sort of what the deal is with monarchs, I'm finally sort of realizing. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to reference current events here, and I'm really sorry, everybody. But over the weekend, while I was sick, Russia attacked Ukraine, and there has been this sort of like panic in response, understandably, but in no small part due to the fact that Russia has nukes. And it's just genuinely like, we can't piss them off because God knows what they'll fucking do. And that's sort of the vibe with monarchs and stuff, is like, just don't do it. Don't do it. Don't get them involved. Don't start anything. Like, we don't want to. If we absolutely have to, then we'll do it. But nobody wants that. It doesn't have to come down to that. So let's just, monarchs just feel like they're so OP that they are mere threats a lot of the time and don't actually get to like combat with each other. And it's just really rare for them to die as well in combat. Like, they'll go at each other and then somebody will have the advantage in a way that they both sort of back off and go, all right, well, see you next time. But it's so rare for them to actually die in combat. It's just really interesting to me, the concept of being too powerful to be used in some ways, just being used for warnings. So he takes like the rest of the day off, which is so funny that he can do this. It's just the battle is so ongoing that he could just clock out and like go take a shower and start cycling. And it's just a very funny sort of, there's something almost routine about it, And he's also thinking about if he advances, his conditions would get better, but he also might be able to move Jai Chen and Kelsa to a safer position, at least one more suitable for low golds. And that sort of like tickled me a little bit. The fact that he's so concerned about them that he's just like, a major part of my motivation here is getting them the fuck out of here. They shouldn't be here. Caleb is saying, Jake says, how much money would I pay for a Cradle anime Kickstarter? A lot. Yeah, somebody better. So, wait for the series to finish. I don't want to wind up in a fucking situation, but yeah, I would love it. Caleb says, Cradle geopolitics is very similar to real world. Let the civilians die in the thousands because there's a chance the nukes might get involved. Exactly. It's funny because we'll be like, well, the nuke would cause so much damage, but then like millions of people will die. However, it doesn't result in like, the death of the planet in such a way that we couldn't sustain life afterwards. So I guess I get it. Jake says, monarchs as nukes and the threat of them being used is a perfect analogy for the rules of engagement in Cradle. Thank you, Jake. All right. So he is thinking about what his fear is because he's taking Lindon's advice. Can I just tell you guys how delighted I am that he's out here just taking Lindon's advice and he's not being a little bitch about it the way that he can be. And I will be fucking fully honest, the way that I can be. There is nothing worse than somebody that you don't really like giving you good advice. Like, oh, the worst. And it's just innate in me to not want to take advice anyway. Like, flat out, even if I do like you, I don't want to be told what to do or advised unless I specifically ask for it, which I almost never do because I know how I react to it, even when I ask for it. But when it's somebody that I don't like giving unsolicited advice, like, forget it. I will actively do the opposite just to be a petty little child. It is a toxic trait. It's no good. And I try to fight it and I'm getting better, but I am fucking guilty of it. And we all know that Jailong is the same way. So he is growing. This is growth. He follows his fear and he thinks that it's going to be about caring for his sister. And it says the aura was thick, but after so many failed attempts, he had stopped using the most powerful natural treasures he could. And I'm like, that doesn't really make sense, dog. Like, to fail, and then because you failed, you're like, I guess I'll just start using like lower quality. Like, it's not like they don't go bad. They don't get used if you don't advance, do they? Or maybe they do. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's like when you cook and you're trying to get this like, you know, like truffle mac and cheese recipe right. And you keep using like your best truffle oil and that shit is not coming out. And you're like, you know what? All right, I'm going to use the fucking cheap stuff next time because I don't know. Maybe that's what is going on. Because I sort of thought the treasures, like, if you can't advance, they just chill. And then you collect them and put them away and you come back out with them next time. So I didn't really understand this because, I mean, that's what we saw with Lindon was he picked stuff back up and put it away again after he was done and it hadn't worked. So I just assumed that's always how it went, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But yeah, so he strained to sense any change. The very day he had developed his spiritual perception, he had pushed himself to prove his talent, to show the Jai elders that he was worthy of their attention and respect. He had been so afraid to let them down. The aura around him shivered and triggered his soul fire. So, question, because obviously, Lindon was able to stop and then proceed with his advancement once he was in a more advantageous state. Jailong does not do that, and I'm unclear as to whether or not that is because he doesn't know that he can stop, or if it, for some reason, like, was like it took like a flame a little bit quicker than it did with Lindon, and it wasn't possible for him to stop, in fact, the way it had been for Lindon. But either way, he doesn't like make any attempt to hold it back here, even though he isn't, you know, he's not really in a good place for it. So I found that sort of puzzling. I was just curious about, Caleb says, I think when the advancement triggers, the treasures are consumed for the soul fire that advances their body. Right. That, like, I know that's what happens when the advancement triggers, but I'm saying he's not using the best stuff anymore because he's failed so many times. And if when you fail, they are not consumed, why wouldn't you just keep using the good stuff? Like, it doesn't seem like that makes sense to me. I don't know. Jan says Jailong doesn't even know what the revelation was, but Lindon didn't either. He triggers his by accident. Doesn't he? Like, I thought that's how it happened when he was in the forge or whatever you call it. And then Mercy tackles him, stops him, and he picks it up where he left off when they are in the vault in a better and more advantageous place. Andy says Lindon was only able to stop when he felt he was on the precipice of advancing. Once it actually starts, it just has to go. Okay, thank you, Andy. Because that's what I was sort of wondering. Like, it felt slightly different when it happened with Lindon, but I couldn't really put my finger on, like, you know, the way it says Soulfire triggered inside him. I didn't remember that being said with Lindon, but I couldn't be sure. So, okay, cool. And he is so flipped out here as he realizes that this flame that's reforging him is really, really slow. This soul fire. It's like not doing it the way he wants. And at this rate, he couldn't know how long it would take him to advance. Days? Weeks? He had just been trying to sense the resonance of the aura. He hadn't truly intended to advance. After hundreds, perhaps thousands of tries, who would have thought he would succeed now? And honestly, the worst. I feel for him, man. I am just, like, as far as the mechanics of this, again, I always want to know details. If people around him recognize that he's advancing, can they bring more natural treasures around him to make the aura denser for him? Or are whatever treasures around him, when it starts, the only fuel that he gets? Because that's what it sounds like. And that sucks. Elliot says, I think Jai Long just didn't have as good treasures at that moment. No, it specifically says that he isn't using them on purpose. You know? So it's just, I don't know. It's weird to me. But it doesn't matter. It started for him. I hope it doesn't take a fucking week, because that guy, he's going to be in such a mood by the time he gets out of it. He's going to be irritated and he's going to be insufferable to be around. So we go back to our crew in the labyrinth, and Little Blue and Orthos are feeling a bit of a way about Lindon, like, not letting them out of the key while they were fighting. And I love Yaren has to come over and be like, all right, so, like, here's what happened. And finally, Orthos and Little Blue are like, fine, I guess that's, like, a good excuse or whatever. And I just really enjoy when they get a bit of an attitude. Sorry, I just want to address a couple of comments. Caleb says maybe he's been using them for soul fire since he's been fighting. Not sure, might be a small slip up. Rob says, I interpreted it as the natural treasures are only there for meditation / finding the unity, but the aura density of the area is what controls the speed. I mean, it says that he didn't use his good treasures and that was the problem. So yeah, I don't know. There's a specific line that I read that said after failing so many times, he had stopped using it says, the aura was thick enough, but after so many failed attempts, he had stopped using the most powerful natural treasures he could. He specifically says, I could use better, and I'm not. You know, so I don't know. I'm just saying that's what the words say there. It feels like really purposeful, and like he just made a really pointless, stupid choice for some reason that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, so these guys are all regrouping because the fucking labyrinth keeps on like changing doorways and making them wait, and there's all shit going on like that is slowing them down, because as it turns out, we find out Subject 1 has basically like fully taken Raygon Shen's side, and whatever it is that Raygon Shen is offering it sounds like Raygon Shen is basically like, I'm gonna take this power and like either kill you or cause you to not exist or absorb you in such a way. Like the vibe that I get later on, and I'll get to that specific moment, but when he is in Lindon's head, when Lindon connects with Subject 1, he says something like, a monarch will finally come and end the like shit that they started, basically. And there's a sense of Subject 1 knowing that it's going to either die or simply cease to be or whatever, and it being fine with that, because after all this time, it's just been like sitting here starving. Not totally sure if I'm getting that right impression there, but yeah. So this like whole situation with the labyrinth got me so paranoid. Guys, I can't tell you. I was so relieved in some ways when the rest of the crew took off. I don't want them separated. You know, I really love everybody together. I love getting to see them each like push it to the limit and what they can do. But they are at real risk here. They're suffering in some cases. And I was reassured a great deal by the fact that Subject 1 even lets some of them leave. Because low-key, I was not really sure what Subject 1's energy was going to be in terms of their presence. I know that it seems like he does not want them there, but does he not want them there in the way that you just kick them out? Or does he not want them there in the way that you really fucking try to kill them? And it seems like it's the first one. He gives them all these opportunities to bounce if they are able to, because he is sick of dealing with them. And that really speaks to like the badassery of our people. It's not that they couldn't have been worn down eventually, because they could, but I keep forgetting that like Subject 1 has a limited amount of energy to work with as well. So every time that he starts an attack against them, he is using up some of that energy, and he is going to wind up using it all up if he keeps going against these people who are pretty fucking good at what they do and able to, in Yaren's case, take out like an entire fucking ballroom full of baddies. And like I said, it was really reassuring to me, because I just keep feeling like they are in enemy territory. An enemy territory that's being controlled from the outside in such a way that it reminds me of like the designers creating the game board for the Hunger Games or something. And they are at such a disadvantage because of that. But then the reminder that he also has limited resources to a degree and doesn't want to fucking be dealing with them, actually. It's not like he's some evil villain who's like, I want to kill you and make it hurt. You know, he's just genuinely like, can you fucking not? I have a whole other thing going on here. And that is something I can cope with. All right. That's better. I would prefer that. So this little regroup, they wind up finding this, series of pods essentially that used to be Dread God tanks. And I should mention, like, everybody's cores got refilled and people are healed again, but they have, like, completely run out of elixirs. So if anything were to happen to them from here, it will be real, real bad. There's not going to be repair possible, at least not in, you know, the immediate future. They'd have to, like, hope that they could get out and then get healed. So then they find this, this separate area. So each of the tanks has the remaining sort of, I don't know if it's like aura, if that is what you call this here, because it's like got the color of each of the dread gods in them. And even Yaren, when she's near one of them, she's like, it feels like I'm getting smeared in the face with mud. I think it's the one for the Bleeding Phoenix. One had been stained red, one blue gold, one a heavy yellow, and one purple and white. So by stain, does that mean that it's aura? Is that right? So Lindon is looking around, keeping things open so that he can perceive some stuff. And Eithan is like poking around and he like knocks at something and a tray slides open. And here is a binding. I didn't even realize until they're called bindings later that this is what it is. I don't know why I didn't like put that together, because we've been told what bindings look like a few times, but it just truly, I was kind of like, what's the deal with this? And it's pretty much out of aura. Like, it's giving off a little bit, but it was such a strong, like, deeply infused treasure that it gave off its own aura and didn't need replenishment. And that is why it was used for this. And he decides that he's going to collect these and use them for forging, which, good idea. So they wind up managing to get them from all of these different places. Dross is like, oh, nice. I'll definitely accept these as tribute. Thanks, guys. And I can't, guys. I hate this Dross. Like, I like him because he is funny at times, but I don't like him. I just like, at least base Dross, which I'll call him like beta Dross because it felt like he wasn't really, I feel like he felt at least non-threatening and like he was trying his best. He was aware of what Lindon wanted and was attempting it, and he was misguided, but he was doing his best. And this Dross is like a fucking maniac, man. He is just dangerous to me inside Lindon's head. I just like especially don't like it. And I have mentioned before that Dross in the past has been kind of a shit to Lindon a few times, like just kind of discouraging, and he'll take it back when push comes to shove and be like, I know I give you a hard time, but honestly, you're kind of badass and I appreciate you. But it's infrequent. Most of the time he's in his head being like, yeah, you think you could do, no. And it feels like this Dross is just taking all of those worst aspects of the other Dross and like he's exaggerating them and he's more serious about it, you know? So anyway, Eithan handed the device to him and Lindon opened the portal to the Soul Forge right in front of the tanks. And this is really interesting. So first, he has to make a hammer. And I don't know how many of you all were completely on the same page here as what was going on. It really took me by surprise when it turns out the hammer isn't the weapon. I know. I should have realized, but I was like, not exactly following. It's not spelled out totally explicitly like that it's going to be a hammer to use. It's just said that, like, I think Eithan and Ozriel both, they emphasize the use of a hammer. And I didn't think about the fact that they're talking about, like, in forging. I thought that he meant in combat, which I thought was sort of weird. But, because I was like, it's not like Eithan uses a hammer, and I don't remember Ozriel having used a hammer in combat either, but, like, maybe they're, I don't know. And then it fucking becomes clear that this is meant to be a forging hammer, and I felt like such a dum-dum. So he infuses each side of this hammerhead with different madra. And one of them is the blue light that is meant to create things that are probably like sort of more purifying. And then there's the black flame one, which is meant to add destruction and, you know, a deadly edge to weapons. And I really like this idea of him having a hammer that can do both is so compelling to me because of just generally, Eithan like sized Lindon up from day one, and I have to assume saw immediately the advantage of having twin cores, right? And it feels like so much of this is going according to Eithan's like desires in terms of a plan that he had in place already. And we know later on, he talks about how lonely it was in some ways to be as gifted as he was, because every time that he advanced or did something amazing, friends were left behind. There's no way to bring people with you when you begin to grow in that particular way. You can like try to spread around the advantages you're given if you can, but that's not the same thing as them being able to keep up with you. And so I'm sure that a major part of his motivation was simply, I would like people that I think are good and motivated and gifted to, and I mean good, like in terms of in their heart good, you know, he wouldn't hazard this on people who seemed like they were not going to do the right thing when it came down to it. But I think he's motivated by, you know, knowing what his ancestor was like, saying to Lindon here, he was not a kind man. And it really feels like he knows that the guy isn't kind before they come down here and come across a bunch of like records and stuff. So I'm wondering if he saw Lindon and saw the potential for somebody who could have similar abilities with his connection with the void and cleansing and being able to like, you know, do a similar thing as a Reaper would be able to, but also have an alternative that is compatible in a way, but different enough that he doesn't get completely consumed by this one technique, you know? I don't know. I'm very curious. We still don't know what's going on with Eithan's like mind here. And I am just dying, guys. I want to know more about him. I just like want an Eithan book, to be honest. I want a book. You know what would be fun? Stephanie Meyer did this with Twilight. And honestly, it sucked. But I like the concept. Going back and writing Cradle again, all from Eithan's perspective. Tell me that would not be a good read. Like, I mean, come on. You could honestly like just do Cradle from several different perspectives, and not that we get people's other perspectives in this book, but you know what I'm talking about. Like before we ever get into their heads or situations that we don't get to see that we only hear about, or you know, whatever. Also, I just like to hear the reactions to shit. So he manages to pull this hammer into reality, and he is just like, all right, this is pretty rad. That felt strange. And everybody's like, all right, so what are you going to name it? And I love Lindon's reaction here. Lindon could tell they were heading into a situation in which everyone shouted out their suggestions for a name. And I'm like, you know what this is ripe for, everybody? A blooper. I am really hoping that there is a naming things blooper at the end of this. Fingers crossed. So he turns to Dross, and Dross says, World Breaker, Father of Weapons, Iron of the Netherworld, Midnight, Curse, Genesis of the Destroyer. I don't mind Genesis, Lindon thought. Dross spat at him. What does it mean for Dross to spit at him? Is that like, just like a sneer? Or like a, or does he like spit? Can he make spit? What does that mean? Anyway, I love this so much. When he says Genesis, like everybody's sort of like, all right, fine, I guess. Nobody seems excited by it. Mercy is like, it's not long enough. And now he has to go and build the weapon. And he has to like go kind of fast with it. There's a couple things going on. One, Madra is like weaving around the trident by itself as soon as he sets it down. So it's like starting to just build on its own. And two, Lindon has like fuel that he isn't willing to destroy. He stands there holding it and does this like, are we sure? Eithan slapped his hand, knocking the twisted ring into the soul forge. The circle of bone flew into the flames. I loved that so much. Lindon stopping. Lindon's doing a little bit of what his sister like was accused of, which is trying too hard to stop and like investigate every step instead of just taking the step, you know? I enjoy Eithan just kind of not even trying to argue with him, just being like smack and getting it fucking on the road. Thank you, Eithan. Appreciate you, bud. So he begins to build his weapon, which winds up being a spear. And I fucking love, you bring destruction. You bring ruin. You bring death. Dross cackled in his head. See, this is what I don't like. It's funny, though. I'll give him that. It's just, you know, I don't know. I feel like there's even a moment later, once this spear is completed, that he feels its voice in his head urging him to destroy, and is sort of like, man, I wish I could put this in my void key because this shit is loud as fuck. And I'm like, yeah, I don't love that in combination with Dross. I don't know what kind of influence these things can have, but like, frankly, I don't want to find out. I don't. So he pulls this spear out, and Eithan says, I don't know that you could quite call it a monarch weapon, but a monarch wouldn't be ashamed to use it. And he is looking at this and very proud of it. It is dope as hell, honestly. An entirely new weapon hung in the air, a spear. Its shaft was dark with a green tint to it, and the steel of its blade was a death green chrome. That's just cool. I just like it. Spectral green sparks came off the weapon here and there as though it were still hot. Dope. Just is cool. I like it. It pushed against the spirits of everyone present, seemed to bend the air around it. Even its spiritual might wasn't at all inferior to the attack of the sword Rhaegon Shen had used to crack space. Maybe one day it would evolve into a monarch weapon if someone used it to accomplish great deeds, but at the moment, he would pit it against almost any other weapon he'd ever encountered. And he looks over at Mercy's, like, really good bow, Sue, and he's looking at it and he's like, mine's better. Damn. And I Love Mercy isn't even, like, I don't know if she senses what he's doing in terms of sizing her weapon up against his, but she is just all enthusiasm, because if there is one thing that Mercy is, it is supportive. Mercy is the one that you want to, like, help you get ready before you go on a date. Like, she would just hype you up so much that you would walk out feeling like you were the hottest shit on planet Earth. So, yeah, I love her to death. And this little bit with just being like, it looks so awesome! Give it a name! What is it? And Eithan says, Lindon already had a turn. Who's next? And I'm like, it's Lindon's weapon! What do you mean he had a turn? This isn't a community weapon where everybody gets a say. He should get to name his own weapon every time. Eithan, I don't even know what you're talking about. Stop it. I was very irritated. I don't know, maybe Eithan just didn't like Genesis as much as he pretended to, but I felt a way about it. After a moment of deliberation, Lindon was left with Midnight Cursed Spear of the Destroyer. You guys, I just don't like it. I just don't like it. It's fine. I don't have to like it. But man, you know, there are some... I wanted better. Genesis I really like it. It's so simple and it feels like a little threatening, even though it's actually not a weapon. You know, I don't know. I liked it, but it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Kat says Mercy did help Lindon prepare for a date. Fuck, you're right, Kat. I forgot about that. Oh my God, that's literally what happened. Oh, I forgot all about that. Thank you, Kat. So then as they are leaving, everything, all of the like entrances and stuff begin to swirl around and everything. There's a shuffle and doorways opened up all around the room. But one caught everyone's attention in the first moment. Instead of a gaping cave mouth onto a hallway of stone, this one was a small wooden door leading off the platform with the Dread God tanks. It simply hadn't been there before. And instead of a symbol over it, there was a handprint. It was thin and skeletal, sunk into the stone, and it had stained the rock white. And Eithan's like, obviously, this is where we're going. So they go in, and there is, first of all, his binding is like dust, but Lindon just is unfazed by this and takes all the dust. Like, he's just really very careful about that, as he would be, because he is a fucking hoarder. And then we have the reflections on the concept of nothingness everywhere. What was hunger if not a desire to devour, a will to allow the stranger in and kill me, borrow my powers, start the chain of events that would finally end it all. Yo, I forgot that he like literally says, allow him to kill me. I was like theorizing about how it sounded earlier, but that's literally what he says. So I don't know what Tosh. And I love Dross being like, there is a man with a plan. You should really learn to be more like that. Oh my God. So then he reaches out again He waits in the darkness. He had waited for time beyond counting, hungry for freedom, for power, for everything. He only knew hunger and the connection to the others of his kind that remained on the surface, those who had followed him, the dread gods. Finally, a monarch had come to him. Finally, one of those who had cursed the world had come to end what they had created. Word? Cursed the world? Had Rhaegon Shen been part of, like, the creation of these guys? Or does he just mean monarchs in general are, like, ain't shit? Because that sounds like what he's saying. Subject 1 welcomed Rhaegon Shen with open arms. The monarch was close and would be here soon. He would close off the labyrinth from the pursuers so they could not interfere, for the slumbering wraith hungered for all things, even death. And Lindon realizes what's about to happen because he's like, I'm going to shut y'all out. Yells out, but nobody can move in time. The doorway closes and they are stuck in this, like, fucking closet. So they stand there trying to figure out about what, like, how long it could possibly take for another doorway to open up, how long they can afford to just chill and wait, and how soon should they make a move and try and, you know. And then we get this moment with Orthos. And I was just so touched by this, guys. Every time, I know that it's, like, fine, but every time Lindon has to say goodbye to Orthos in any way, I just start to get really, like, it's just the last time that happened. You guys remember, I fucking cried. I literally cried when Orthos went off to have his own revelation and they split up. I was, like, devastated. So I know that that's, like, not really the same situation here, but I still, because of the fact that there is such a gulf between them in terms of advancement now, there's something, like, sadder about it to me. I don't know. It's just really uncomfortable to see the people that you used to look up to now be people who can't keep up with you. It's tough. So basically, they're like, why don't we just burn a hole through the floor? And Orthos is like, all right, fine. I'm going to lend you my power to do this, and then I'm going to bounce because I can't be any further help. Like, y'all know it. I know it. At least let me be useful real quick before I take off and at least get y'all out of here. And it kills me for a second because Lindon agrees to do this. They use the black flame on the floor and they dig like a 3-foot hole. And then they haven't gotten through and Orthos has run out of power. And I was so sad. I really thought, like, this had just not worked. And then Lindon just says, almost. And he's he says just a little more. Sure enough, the next room was only a few more inches down. Oh, thank God. If Orthos had done all of that and they didn't even get through, I was going to be really pissed off. But thankfully, they have gotten through. And Orthos lands on this transfer circle, which I hadn't mentioned actually, but the transfer circle, Dross is fucking cackling about that too, because he's like, oh yeah, that's here so that every time they failed to make a dread god, they could just send a psychotic half-made dread god out of the lab and get rid of it. And I was just like, fuck's sake, these people. Ugh. So he takes off with Little Blue, who basically is like, all right, I also am not going to be any further help. I got to face facts as well. I need to go with him. And Lindon feels very reassured by that because they can sort of help one another. So this is the first of the crew that departs. And I got to be honest, y'all, I just really didn't like it. And I appreciated how much Lindon was like, I made this whole fucking speech about how I wasn't going to do this. And then I'm doing it. I can't believe this. Like, it's, I just said this, like, what, an hour ago? Like, I can't believe that I have to go back on my word right away. And I really kind of liked it, to be honest, because there is just such a thing in fiction where a character will just decide something and will it to be true despite what reality is doing. And somehow they come out the other side victorious, and they have managed to will it into true. And that isn't how it fucking works. You can set your mind to something and be incredibly determined and committed, and it still doesn't work out. That's life. And it can be so invalidating, I think, to constantly have fiction telling you if you just wanted it bad enough, if you just committed enough, you'd be able to do it. I don't like that message. I feel like it makes people feel like bigger failures, that it's their fault in a way if something doesn't work. And sometimes it might be, but not always. You can do everything right and you don't get what you want. So I just kind of like that. Yeah, Lindon makes this like declarative fucking speech that gets everybody psyched up, and he's really emotional about it. And then right away has to be like, never mind. That's how it fucking goes, man. I don't know. I just really appreciated this. This is something I'm facing with like covering One Piece, which will be actually the next Spoil Me up. So if any of you are One Piece fans, you can join me for that. But it's something that I have trouble with in One Piece. Every time a character just decides that they want something bad enough, they manage to make it happen. And it's like, I get the reasoning behind wanting to sell that message to kids so that they keep believing in themselves and trying. But there's just also a sense of like, never give up. And no, sometimes you should give up. Sometimes what you're trying to do won't work or isn't working for you. And to just say never give up as like a blanket statement, I think that's like damaging. I don't think that's a good thing. Figure out what works for you, and failure will tell you when you're not heading in the right direction, and you can redirect. Without failure, you're not ever going to be sure you're going the right way. You need it. So anyway, that's my rant, and I really, really like this moment. And I just I felt for him, I understand why he's so frustrated, but I just thought narratively it was much more interesting to have him have to take it back a little bit. So this is when he realizes all right, I thought we were kind of getting out of the trap, but since subject 1 has not reacted with the kind of rage I would expect if we broke out of a trap, we're still fucking in the trap. And he is proven correct. We get this monarch that steps out, and there's a couple of them that they wind up facing. First, he uses the key, the hand, to figure out which way they have to go. All of these fogs of venom Madra, balls of fire Madra, more ghouls and shit come out, and the ghouls are intense. Lindon is realizing now this is what it looks like when subject 1 stops fucking around. He is really trying to get at us, and one of the ghouls touches him and takes a fucking good sized bite out of him. It's enough to notice, and he is really shaken by that. And he manages to use the hollow domain here to keep things back. And I have to say, the hollow domain is pretty rad, honestly, how often he's able to use it and the ways in which he's able to use it. I really like it in terms of a technique, but it's the kind of thing that while it does protect everybody, he'll eventually run out of Madra, and it doesn't allow other people within it to fight and use their techniques the way they normally would. So it's kind of limited, So they manage to move into the next room, trigger a bunch of new traps, and then the exits vanish. And Mercy is I can't keep doing this, man. I don't know what I'm going to do. And they are looking around, and all of a sudden, this hand begins to come through the stone. And it is this dude who is short and really wide shouldered. And he is wearing these gauntlets. And Ziel says, Steel Dragon's Mountain. Linda didn't know if that was a technique, a place, an organization, or even a path. And this guy fights against Yeren. And as they're fighting, Lindon is kind of curious about the way that these echoes work. And he starts to wonder, like to Dross, whether or not this is something that he could ever learn to make himself. Because, like, I guess the theory here he's having is that he absorbs, like, you know, when his arm is functioning correctly, he absorbs the power from other people. So perhaps if he does that, he could create an echo out of the energy that he has taken from them when they die, which isn't like a bad, I mean, I could see how you would think that would work. Dross reacts with complete derision. He says, "You don't think you're a real hunger artist, do you? Master Northstrider can copy the wills of those he devours into his techniques, but your use of hunger is simple and crude. Even if you had the skill, you are not on a true hunger path, and all you can do is manipulate your arm's binding." Ouch, Dross. There's no reason to put it like this. And I bet Lindon could do something. He could figure something out. He could be supportive. Be more like Mercy. All right? Stop it. So, Lindon says enough and manages to, like, kind of disable this Herald Echo enough that Yeren can defeat him. But it, like, takes a lot out of him to do it. He gets dizzy over it. So they are looking around and Lindon's like, I have to use the hand to find the, like, next route forward, but I don't know if we can do this. Like, this is just taking so much out of all of us. And this is when Ziel says, all right, I'll do it. And then we get to see Ziel unleash. And it is fucking rad. Y'all, look. Okay, so somebody posted some fan art of Ziel and everybody, but Ziel was the one that caught my attention in the Discord for Cradle No Spoilers. And I was startled by the fact that Ziel is, like, drawn as sort of like as young as everyone else and, like, slender and kind of, like, pretty. Obviously, everybody can interpret him any way they want, but I'm just going to tell you guys who I keep seeing. I can't remember the actor's name, so somebody is going to have to help me. Doctor Strange's friend, who is the, like, short, stout sort of Asian guy with a bit of, like, the Danny Trejo kind of scarring on his face, who is like a badass, but also kind of done with everybody a lot of the time. That is the guy that I keep picturing as Ziel, but, like, aged down a little bit. He's younger. But, like, that's the picture that I've had of Ziel in my head this entire time. And I don't know where I got that. I really don't. But I'm into it, and I'm just going to keep that forever. So, Benedict Wong, everybody is saying. Thank you, everybody. I'm so bad with actor names. I really need to, like, figure out a way to work on that. But yeah, that is who I picture. So every time that I saw a drawing of Ziel where he looks like, he just looks like he's, like, maybe 20, you know? And I'm like, I'm sure his age has been mentioned and that people are using the actual canon as their inspiration. But at some point, that is who Ziel became for me, and that is who he has stayed. And that's it. So yeah, when he says, all right, I'll do it here, it's just got a really different vibe when it's somebody who's, like, older and tired and just, you know, and he goes out there and he fucking owns this bitch. And she is really cool, actually. This Echo has, like, these script circles that come out that are, like, sharp. You know, it's just a really neat opponent, I thought. And Ziel is using scripts and runes and forging them in midair at a speed that Lindon is genuinely like, what the fuck? He has never seen anything like this before. And he keeps, with all of the, like, movement that he's making and the runes that he's forging in the midst of the fight, he's, like, getting stronger with it instead of losing his strength. And Lindon's watching and is just like, holy shit. And he even thinks maybe he's got a spirit a little bit like Dross. Dross thinks, not like me. I'm one of a kind. If he had me, he would rule the world. And I'm like, well, you said not like me, but that you didn't say no. So I have got my eye on that a little bit. And And I love that at one point, Lindon sort of begins to cycle, like he's going to have to step in and help. And Ziel looks at him like, what did I fucking tell you? And takes care of shit and ends it. And Lindon didn't have to do anything. And I just, it's so great. I love Ziel so much. I love him so much, you guys, truly. He is just so delightful. And he, at one point, when they look at his, like, channels and everything, like, his spirit has taken a bit of a battering here. He looks down at himself and says, that's embarrassing. Maybe I should try harder. And I am really hoping that that moment is a bit of a signal that he is going to, like, you know, begin to pick it up a little bit more, because he has been so down on himself. And Lindon is so talented and so, he's just a weirdo, honestly, let's be honest, that for him to go, I am in fucking awe of you, dude. What in the hell was that? I feel like maybe that's what Ziel needed, to be like, oh, somebody who's a sage thinks that I just did an incredible job. Maybe that actually means something, you know? So, at this point, an exit opens. And Ziel says it's probably a trap, and then he just leaves. He takes it anyway. He winds up being, like, let out way further away from things, which I really want to know, like, what the deal is with that. But when it opens, everybody else senses that there's a fucking, like, war going on, and all of a sudden Mercy is like, fuck. All right, guys, look. I want to help. I appreciate y'all, like, bringing me along, but I cannot stay down here and be at this level and help you. And I especially can't focus when something is going on up there that could potentially, like, cause, you know, the end of the Black Flame Empire. God knows if something went really wrong. I would just never be able to forgive myself if I was fucking around down here, knowing that I really wasn't going to be able to contribute that much more, while maybe some, like, totally altering shit was going on up there. So I'm going to have to bounce. And she winds up leaving, but she gets spit out, as we see later, in the same spot as Orthos and Little Blue. And Ziel doesn't. And even later when Yeren takes off, she gets spit out in the same place as well as all of them. Why? What is that about? I feel like that's, like, there's a reason behind that, but I don't know what it could be. So I'm out of time. I'm going to have to just take an extra couple minutes, just go over a little bit. But I just, you know, I had to really talk about Ziel's fight. You guys know I had to. And then we have Lindon, Yeren, Eithan, and Dross, because he gets real mad when he isn't counted, heading further on. And it says, evidently the labyrinth had lost patience with them because the walls blurred again. Now there was only one entrance. And I love this, guys, so much. Lindon is thinking about, like, what should we do? What should we do? And then he finally is like, all right, let's fight. He can feel, like, this pressure coming out of that doorway, but he's like, let's do it. He goes forward at fucking a sprint, which means a lot more when it's Lindon sprinting. And Yeren as well, actually. He comes out and sees these fucking maniac creatures that look like Crusher. And immediately turns around and is like, all right, why don't we try digging? And starts to take off. And Yeren is like, I'm going to take care of this. And Lindon starts to be like, we can't win without you. Like, she's sacrificing herself. And Yeren's like, sweetie, oh, sweetheart. And then she just goes ahead and does it anyway, because these creatures all have blood in them. And so she is able to fucking destroy them in, like, one shot. It is honestly just a tiny bit, like, orgasmic how effective she is here. I swear to God, I love Yeren so much. Oh my God, I love all these characters so much. So she takes all these dudes out. I love at one point they're, like, ramping up to come at her, and she literally thinks to herself, oh, please. Or no, she says it out loud. And after she takes them out, Lindon feels the presence again and is like, all right, fuck it. Here we go. And it lets out thousands of creatures in a new room. And again, she goes out there and absolutely stomps them. They are cut into slivers. All this blood pouring down, making a roaring waterfall is the way it's described. Lindon could barely see her. And she manages to just do, like, she uses a bunch of energy, but she makes pretty quick work of this. And then Yaren talks out loud to Subject 1. Keep sending me to the grinder. Maybe when I run out of Madra, you can make my arms sore. And it seems like the creature is about to, like, try her again. And she just begins to cycle power and is like, all right, fine, let's fucking do this then. And she's getting herself fucking hype and ready. And then, all of a sudden, the labyrinth, like, gives in. And it's like, all right, fine. And there's one way to leave, and there is the way forward. And Yaren is like, all right, I'm a bounce. Figure this out. Get your shit and leave. Do not go up against that dickhead again, okay? And don't you two split up either. And as it turns out, they don't really get a say in that. So, this moment is when things sort of get interesting. And I am so mad that I'm a little bit out of time here, but you guys know. Eithan begins to talk about his experience of being lonely, and then tells Lindon, the guy I've been trying to surpass is not Rhaegon Shen. It's my own ancestor who is standing here as an echo. Ozriel is the one. And Lindon is not really hearing him super well here, because he came down expecting to find the Soulsmith inheritance, and this shit has been completely looted, which I kind of should have seen coming, I guess. And he is so devastated by this. It's not just, I wanted it and it's not here. He really believes that's the only way he's going to be able to fix Dross. And now, as far as he's concerned, there's never going to be a way to fix him. And I was just like, Lindon, you are giving up way too easily, sir. This is not like you. Come on. And Eithan is like, it says he looked almost fond. Don't give up yet. There should still be a way. Rhaegon Shen, for instance, always carries top-notch loot, perfect for any soulsmith. And Lindon's like, I mean, I have to learn to use this stuff, though. By the time I do that, I think it'll be too late to change anything, you know? And Eithan is just like, I don't think it's impossible. There'll be hints. I'm always reluctant to tear off a piece of my spirit, but once we get out of here, you could consume from me and borrow my bloodline legacy. I think you could do it. Which is pretty interesting, the idea of being able to do that. I'm into it. I like that. So, this is when they get split up. Lindon is like, all right, well, we're going to face him together. I love that Osmanthus is like waving when Eithan says, Shen isn't the one I'm trying to surpass. He is. Osmanthus is just like, hey, from the background. But he says, let's face him together. And Eithan says, yes, of course, if you think he'll allow that. Lindon was about to ask who Eithan meant when Osmanthus Aurelius put a hand on the labyrinth wall. And all of a sudden, there's authority over the labyrinth being activated. The hallway blurs, and he finds himself facing a dead end. And we have a bit of a moment here with Dross being like, despair! No matter what you do, you end up alone! And Lindon says, I'm not alone. I have you. And Dross's laughter, like, fades away. How does that feel, Dross? And there's so much hunger Madra here. He can feel it. And it's actually activating his arm to the point that it begins twitching and he can't control it. And then comes face to face with the slumbering wraith. And that's the end of his section. real quick. I'm going to talk about Orthos and Little Blue, who get surrounded by, I think it's Blood Moon Hall. Is that who it is that are around them? And these people try to act like, oh, hey, we're here to protect you. This is part of an alliance that we're in. But he can sense finally at one point that this woman's using like, what do you call it? Illusion aura, and dissipates it, and is just like, she says something like, so you're with Lindon, right? And he's like, who? I don't know her. And keeps playing dumb and keeps saying like, oh no, we weren't with anybody. We're just by ourselves. As like Mercy pops out and then Yaren pops out. And honestly, I really want to know what the fuck, because are they hoping to take Lindon by surprise? Like, okay, so Kat says an Archlord and 2 Overlords, I believe. I mean, maybe they could. I don't know. I have my doubts. I'm just saying. But yeah, so that is how that chapter ends, and I'm way over time, so I have to stop, but I really needed to do it. So, yeah, guys, keep an eye on this crowdcast. I will add the extra, like, what do you call it? Session of coverage, and you will be able to see it in the schedule here. Also, I will post on social media. So if you follow me on Facebook and Twitter and all that, you will see when I announce that as well, or in the Discord also. And, yeah, I'm really excited. We're getting into like the sort of, what's it called? The like climactic arc here now in the end. So I'm very, very excited. It's going to be hard to stop reading, I think. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again so much. Thank you to Andy for commissioning this, and for also commissioning an additional one so that I can really get in depth a little bit more. And I will be seeing you guys again next Tuesday with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.